and welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. It's Weird Mythic Podcast. And, of course, I'm Naomi, and I'm always with Serena. And we have a guest with us today, and her name is Emma. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
All right. So today's episode, we have our guest, as I said, and she's going to be giving us some insight to, I'll just go ahead and say it, a cult. So... yeah. I mean, yeah. Serena, do you want to, I know you guys know each other, right?
Yeah, we are like, she's one of my best friends. We've been friends for how many years now? Like,
oh my gosh.
Since like 2007 or 2008, something like that.
Yeah.
Nice.
A very long time.
Yeah. So
good.
Yep. She has seen me grow up. She met me when I was very young, and then yeah, we kind of grew up together. I feel we've been through a lot together, man. Me and you.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
I mean, she actually took me to this cult before, like throwing that out there.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to get started. Well, let's just, throw our little things out there. Of course, follow Weird Mythic Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Don't forget to send us any, weird things about cryptids and whatnot to our Gmail account at weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com. Anything else you girls want to plug?
Isn't there a Reddit for... Okay, so the church or cult, whatever you want to call it, is La Luz Del Mundo, right? LLDM?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the Reddit? Because I know that there's a Reddit for, like, I want to say survivors of this cult or people who have escaped the church, right?
Yes. Yeah, so it's XLLDM. And so, yeah, you'll just type it on there, and it'll be the first thing that pops up on Reddit.
Okay, cool. Okay. So you can go and read people's, stories about how they escaped or things that they've gone through that, right?
Yeah. So it's... so you'll see a lot of other people on there, just with the, recent trial that just happened, which we can, talk about a little bit later. Yeah. We've actually had a lot more people on there saying that, like we just left, or, this is my story and stuff like that.
Ugh, that's crazy. Okay. So yeah, let's get into it. You said you left the church in 2010, right? When you graduated?
Yes. After I left high school, or graduated high school, I stopped going, and it was kind of like just gradual, because I started going to college, and I just didn't want to be involved in that. Like, in that cult, there's a lot of just judging and shaming. And like I've mentioned to you, Serena, before, like, I just felt like I was living a double life. I mean, I pretty much was.
Yeah, for sure.
I was trying to be like this perfect, girl in church who followed all the rules, but just never felt good enough because I just wanted to be myself. And, there's rules about everything. And I didn't like wearing long skirts, especially in Hawaii, where it's so hot.
Right.
And... I wasn't allowed to listen to my favorite music.
Speaking of, I was listening to 3 Days Grace on my way home today, and I'm like, this reminds me of Emma.
Yes, because I loved it. Loved 3 Days Grace. And I just, I felt bad that I liked it. Like, they made me feel bad about it.
So there was a lot of shaming then in the church, right?
Yes.
Okay. What was, before we get into some, because I definitely want to talk about some of the other rules and stuff like that. What did like a typical service look like? So when you would go, I know you said that there was like a insane schedule. Didn't you go like every day almost?
Yes. So, oh my goodness. So it was every single day, every day at 5 a.m. Then there was the evening service at 6:30 p.m. Sundays was 3 services, so it was 5 a.m., 10 a.m., 6:30 p.m., and then Saturdays they sometimes had a 9 or 10 a.m. service as well. So it was just, church every single day. And then when the church had special holidays, so we didn't celebrate, things like Christmas, New Year's, none of that. So it's not like your typical, they claim to be a Christian church, they don't even celebrate Easter. But they would have their own special holidays. Like one is called the Holy Supper. And so that one was every year on August 14th, and that one was several hours long. Like we would be there from like 10 a.m. to all the way to like 6 p.m. And I would actually have to miss school for this special service. And so it was just, just constantly, a lot of time being spent inside these temples.
All right. And so you were like born into the church and the cult, right?
I was not. So my mom joined when I was like 5 years old, but I, spent most of my life in it. So started at a very young age.
You said your mom and dad were missionaries, right? Like back in the day?
They were.
Is that how they met? Through the church, or?
They did not, no. So my dad actually was part of the church when he was a kid. He got baptized when he was 14, which is usually when they tell you that, you should get baptized. It's kind of like a coming of age thing. So when I was 14, I was forced to get baptized. Now they'll say, no one ever forced you, but there was a lot of manipulation involved in that. My mom would basically scare me and said, if I don't get baptized, then if something happens to me, if I die, I go to hell. Or she threatened to kick me out of the house many times. And so it was, for me, it was a survival thing. But anyway, so my dad got baptized at 14. He met my mom years later. They got married. And they got married in Hawaii, moved to Florida. And then in Florida, it was when my mom was looking for a church, and my dad decided to bring her to this church. And she got baptized. And then maybe like a few years after that, they had started a church. And then the leader, who's actually in jail right now, Nason Joaquin, he knew my dad, and he said, hey, I want to start churches in Hawaii. I know you're familiar with Hawaii. I'm going to send you and your family to start some churches. And
oh, shit.
Yeah. And so they started 2 separate churches in Hawaii, which grew really fast.
Is that why you lived in Kauai for part of your...
Yeah.
Like, because you lived in Kauai until middle school, right?
I did, yeah. So we moved to Maui first, and then we got sent to Kauai, and then we got sent to the Big Island. And so my dad started the 2 churches on Kauai and the Big Island. And yeah, it just kind of, grew from there, I guess. And, but yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty intense. So, since your dad was like already in it by the time he met your mom was looking for a church and did like what she saw, obviously.
Yeah.
Do I have that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so do you have any siblings? Were they also involved with the church?
Yeah. So my brother and sister, they weren't as involved. So they both got baptized in this church at 14 as well. And for them, it was just they just stopped going. It wasn't very hard for them to leave. My brother wasn't ever very involved in it. And then by the time my sister turned 14, I was like 23. I'd already moved out and everything. And at that time, my mom wasn't going to church very often anymore. And so that's just part of the reason why for them it was just easier to leave. And then my dad has kind of been in and out for years. So like, sometimes he'll decide that he wants to be part of church. Other times he decides not. So I don't really know where he is at with that. But like my mom, she just recently left. Well, she stopped going many years ago, but just recently, within the last 2 years, finally stopped believing in all their teaching.
All right. Well, let's kind of like, yeah. Well, do you want to get into like Like, what were some of the rules, or what did you guys follow? Because from what I read online, it is a Christian type of religion or group.
Yeah.
But then again, they don't follow everything. They almost seem like fundamentalists, to the core fundamentalists.
Yeah.
So do you want to kind of like get into that and what it was like to just, I don't know, go to church and the things they were teaching there?
Yeah. So the basic teachings is that they have a self-proclaimed apostle. They teach us that this apostle was chosen by God. He holds the keys to heaven. Without him, we cannot obtain salvation. And from there, they have... It is. And so they teach that, these men are just, they're very powerful. They know who you are without even meeting you. So they're given a very, very godlike presence.
Right. It's pretty much if you go against whatever they say, you're going against God.
It is. And so when I was in it, the leader was Samuel. So this was actually founded by, I believe in 1926 by Aaron. And then his son took over, Samuel Garcia, or, my goodness, Samuel Joaquin Flores. And then it was taken over by his son, Nason Joaquin Garcia. And so it's a 3-generation thing. And so they're always, once, one of them had passed away, they always, had, God chose, this new apostle. Yeah.
How crazy that it's just in the family, too. It's like the son and then the son.
Yeah. And I'm surprised that people don't think about that. Like, oh, how weird is it that they just keep choosing, like God keeps choosing a leader from the same family. Like, I'm surprised that they don't think about it at the time.
Right.
So when the leader, Samuel, when nobody actually knows how he died. There's all these theories, and some people say it was cancer. Some people say it was like, I don't know, like, I can't remember what it was, but there's all these theories. But anyway, so he was sick, and he was going to the hospital a lot. I remember somebody had reached out to me, and they're like, you have to come back to church, because you don't know when God's going to come back and, take his church with him. So basically, they're talking about like a rapture happening.
Okay.
Right.
And so, for me, for a moment, I was like, oh my gosh, do I go back? What do I do? But that's the fear-mongering part of it.
Oh yeah, that's like instilled in you from age 5. Like,
yeah, yep. And so I was like, no, I'm not gonna listen to them. And a few days after the leader passed away, God miraculously chose this other leader who also happened to be in the family.
Miraculously.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I remember, so I've actually met him, the current leader. And I remember, like, first time I met him, like, everyone claims that, supposedly, like, you feel, the people in the church are like, you're supposed to feel something special because these are, like holy men and this and that. And I remember when I first met him, I felt so guilty for not feeling anything.
Oh man,
I'm sorry. That is so cute, Emma.
I did.
Because it's really just so innocent for you to think that too.
Like,
because
what's wrong
your
with me?
family knows him. Yeah, your family knows him. You go to church with these people who are like, this is how you're supposed to feel. Yeah. And you're like, I didn't feel that at all. Like, of course you're going to feel guilty, especially since it's been like probably hammered into you how important this person is.
Yeah. I mean, this, they give him like this huge authority. And, for a long time, like, I just felt bad. And it took years to, get away from feeling all that fear. The year that I left the cult, I had, I started college, and I had gotten into a car accident. And actually, Serena, I don't know if you remember this, Charlie was driving me home.
Oh, gosh.
And it was a rainy day. He had bald tires, and so we crashed. And I called my mom, and her response was, "This is God's way of punishing you for leaving." And he's
the fuck?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so that was just her response. Like there was just, God was punishing me for leaving.
God made the
And
tires bald, and
Wow.
Charlie couldn't control the car. Like,
yeah, yeah. And
really, it's all Charlie's fault, but
it is. Exactly. But and it was just
Wow.
and also so then she goes to pick me up and I'm wearing pants and I can't remember if I mentioned the dress code was the long skirts and so I'm
no
over here
short
wearing
sleeve, right?
pants and no short sleeves and
You couldn't cut your hair too, right?
Yep, so I had to have my long hair.
Yeah, I remember you always had the longest hair. I was so happy when I saw that you got married in Vegas and cut your hair. I was like, yes, bitch.
I wore the shortest dress ever.
I know.
My hair was so short. I was wearing
I loved
earrings and heels. I like full on went out and
how did that feel when you did that?
oh my gosh. So I didn't tell my mom didn't even know I was dating. And because they don't allow relationships that are outside of the cult. And they always preach that, if you want to get married with honor, it has to be someone with, from the cult. And I was like, that's not going to happen for me. And so I met my husband in college. And, we were dating for a while. I think we were dating for like 3 years. And my mom had no idea. Or she was in denial. I don't know. Everyone else thought it was very obvious. And I called her an hour before we got married because we eloped. And I was like, hey, Mom, just letting you know I'm getting married in an hour. And the only reason I called was because my husband said that I should call my mom or my dad. So I called them. And she freaked out. She was super angry at first. And then she starts crying. She's like, I just can't believe you didn't tell me about this and you didn't invite me. And,
but realistically at that time, would your mom have gone like without a fight? Like
I think it would have caused a lot of drama.
Yeah.
I think if I had actually planned like an actual wedding and I had told her I was getting married to someone who's not in the church, I think she would have just freaked out even more. I think
so too.
Probably would have made me feel bad, or she
would have tried to get you out of it, probably.
Yeah. And we actually recently talked about that because now like we have a really good relationship, and she asked me how come I never told her about this before, and I'm like, you have to think about, like, Mom, you still believed in all this stuff. Like, I'm like, you wouldn't have handled it very well. And she was upset that she wasn't invited, but again, we had eloped. He had proposed. We were in Vegas for a chef convention, and he proposed, and he's like, okay, well then I said yes, and he's like, okay, let's get married today. And so we went and we got married that day.
That's adorable.
I love that story. Okay, I want to go back to kind of dating and stuff since we're on that topic. And I know you mentioned like grooming within the church. Yes. Can you talk about what that looked like?
Yeah, so I didn't realize it at the time, but I was being groomed at a very young age to basically be like a servant for the leader. The leader at the time, he loved, and this is, by the way, might be a little hard to hear or not, but he loved stuff like hula dances and with, like with the grass skirts and, that kind of outfit. And when I was in elementary, I, danced hula, and I remember the minister's wives would tell me, you should keep practicing your hula. Maybe one day you'll get to dance with the apostle. And at the time,
how creepy is that?
It's so creepy. And at the time, I didn't know any better. I was like, okay. I'm like, they don't allow dancing. They don't, allow any music or anything like that. So I did find it a little weird that they're saying that I could dance hula in front of this leader. But I was like, okay. I was like, that'd be cool, to be in front of this leader. again, I'm like 10 at the time when this happened.
Yeah, you're a child. Yeah,
And
oh, how strange.
It wasn't until years later where I learned that they took these, and that's how they started off. They would start off with these dances, and then later on they would have these girls, wear less and less clothing, and a lot of these girls ended up being sexually abused. So that's one part of it, and so that one, that part, it's not really known by a lot of people. It was usually just like the higher up people that knew about this. Like in the typical church setting, as far as dating goes, though, they don't allow any hand holding, kissing, or anything like that. If they catch anyone engage in any sort of physical contact, even if they're just holding hands, they're made to get married immediately.
Oh gosh.
And like forced
to get married. Yeah, they're like, oh, we caught you fornicating with this person, you guys have to get married now. And so then they'll take them to a courthouse. So they don't even get to plan a wedding. They just take them to a courthouse and they get married. And then usually, if they get married that way, they go under a 1 year kind of like I don't even know how to, I guess like a probation period or whatever. And like the whole, they get shunned, and basically the church tells them, don't talk to these people. They were fornicating. You don't get to talk to them for about a whole year.
Even though they just got married and what?
I actually got to witness this firsthand with a friend of mine, and this was on Kauai, and the girl was a really good friend of mine. Like we hung out all the time, and then I didn't know that she liked one of the guys from the church. Next thing I know, she got married, and we were told, like, you're not allowed to talk to them until we say that you can talk to them. That kind of sucks. I'm like, I like hanging out with these people. And it was just super weird. They were, I want to say they were probably like 18 or 19 years old at the time. So very young. I was actually told at one point that they basically threatened me with marriage. There was an incident that involved some older guy. He was messaging me we did nothing. He never did anything to me. But the minister found out that he was messaging me, and he basically said that if I told my parents or if I told anyone about this incident, that me and him were going to have to get married. When I turned 14. And so I was like 13 at the time. And I'm like, I don't want to get married to this guy. And then later on, there was some other abuse that had happened. And the guy basically also told me, he's like, if you tell anyone about any of this, I'm just letting you know that they will make us marry each other. And, for years, like I would have nightmares of me being forced to get married. Even after I got married, I still had these nightmares. Because, can you imagine, having this in the back of your head as a teenager, and just your whole life, at any point, if the minister decides that he wants to marry me off to somebody, I have to listen. Because if I don't, then that could actually be like going against God.
That's so sad.
Yeah. And so it was terrifying for a while. And, I couldn't even tell my parents about this. Like, that's how much fear they put in you. But yeah. So it's pretty intense.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about the mass wedding that happens in Mexico, where hundreds of people. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah. So every year they have these mass weddings, and so basically they take. They say that that these women and the men are all virgins. They're told that they're the best of people, and they line them up, and basically whoever they are standing next to is who they get married to. What I recently found out in just the last couple of years is that a lot of these girls that were married off, though,
were actually girls that were groomed in this church and were actually sexual servants for the leader. And once he felt he was like done with them, he would actually take them and marry them off.
Oh, that is so sad.
And that, again, that part, like, it's not known to the rest of the church. Like, I grew up just thinking, like, they tell us, like, oh, it's a great honor because the apostle is handpicking your spouse. Because they say it's the apostle who picks the couples, and they're like, this is like the best, like the greatest honor you can receive. And so I grew up always thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, what if I get chosen one day and I have to do that? I had no idea at the time that a lot of these girls who were getting married off were abused when they were younger.
That's so freaking sad.
Yeah.
So for a lot of the marriages within the cult, it sounds like that they are chosen by those already in the cult who should marry who type of thing.
Yeah, so a lot of them are kind of arranged. Sometimes the members, they always have to ask for permission. So, say a guy likes a girl, he has to actually go up to a pastor or minister and say, hey, I want to talk to her. A lot of the times they are arranged. And the ones that are not, they're only given about 3 months to get to know each other. And again, the same rules apply. There's no hand-holding, kissing, or like not even being together alone without a chaperone. And then after those 3 months pass, then they have to decide if they want to get married or not.
That's like 1800. That's some Bridgerton shit right there.
It is. It's crazy. Like, and they're always like, you always see these young girls like getting married. And I just always feel so bad for them because aside from the fact that, they end up getting married young, they're also very anti-contraceptives. So,
so they just pop out babies like.
So, yeah.
Because it's for the church.
Yeah. So
more babies, the more people can join and all that.
Yep. And it's so sad. Like all these girls, they have so many babies, and they even like preach about this in church, where like the women always has to be there for the husband, and and if you're gonna have sexual relationships with your husband, it's to have a baby, and it's just like that.
So you're just that's crazy that the woman's literally just like there to pop out babies and listen to whatever the husband says.
Yeah.
So there has to be a lot of like abusive relationships and failed marriages then within the church, right? But you can't get divorced, right?
Yeah. So they don't allow divorces. A lot of the times, if a couple were to get divorced, they usually get shunned. And of course, most of the time, it's the women that only get shunned. There's been instances where, like, the whole family just stops talking to the woman, and then, like, years later, the pastor will say something like, "Oh, well, the husband can get remarried, but you can't because I don't know, you're a woman, I guess. I don't know."
Ew.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was reading online too. Is it really is just if you're a woman that's in this cult, and you do marry a man who's also in the cult, it's that whole thing is that you pretty much belong to him. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, you're there to make babies, you're there to take care of the house, and that's it.
Yep. And it's,
that makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It does, dude. Me too. I'm sitting here just like, I don't know what to do with myself right now. It's so uncomfortable for those of us, especially looking completely from the outside, how uncomfortable it just makes us. Just because there's nothing we could do about it. It's a belief system. You were in it. And how hard is it for you to completely change your mind about that? It doesn't happen overnight, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it does not. Like I said, I've had like anxieties for just many years. I kept going back and forth. Like even after I left, I'm like, do I go back? I remember having a thought at one point. I'm like, well, if I go to hell, I go to hell. I can't continue living like this. because it was just too hard. I'm like, I don't want to, end up getting married to someone I don't even know. Or, I want to feel comfortable in the way I dress. Like, I don't feel comfortable wearing long skirts all the time. I want to cut my hair. And just all these, like, small things, like, they always made me feel so guilty about it. And so it's just...
Because it's... What it sounds like is it's almost them just taking away your free will, which is something people can't take away, but they can definitely try to, like, dampen it and make it seem like this is how you should be.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do is actually wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And even, like, when it comes to, like, taking trips, like, you even have to ask for permission to go on vacation. And the minister has the right to say, he has the right to say yes or no, you can go on vacation. Or if you do go on vacation, you have to promise that you'll at least go and visit the church that is in whatever city you're going to. So stuff like that. You're not even allowed to make like a move. Like, you're not even allowed to say, like, oh, hey, I'm taking a job in this other state without permission. You have to have, like, a written letter from the minister or pastor stating that yes, he has permission or she has permission to leave the state, to go to this other state, and then they have to make sure that there's a church nearby.
That is insane.
I mean, just looking stuff up the last couple days, it sounds like there's a lot of churches. Like, from what I saw, there's about 50 different countries that have a huge following.
There are two within driving distance of me. Like, I was looking it up. Like, one is right where I work, like, right there. And then there's one in, like, North Houston. And I'm like, holy shit, they're everywhere.
Yeah. Oh.
Right, because just so I want to make sure that I know, this is also, like, called the Church of the Living God, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure. I was like, because I was seeing that a lot, and I'm like, I know I've probably have seen that church somewhere. I know I have. So they're everywhere.
They mainly just go, because it's like a long name, like, but they mainly just shorten it to either the Light of the World or La Luz Del Mundo, which is the Spanish version of it. But yeah, no, they're everywhere. They're even, I remember I came into contact, I'd moved, and, I won't say where I moved to, but I moved to a new town, and it was a town where there weren't very many Spanish-speaking people. And this guy kept looking at me, and then he comes up to me, and he's like, hey, do you speak Spanish? And I was like, yeah, I do. And so we started talking, and he's like, it's really nice to meet other people that speak Spanish. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm like, I'm always looking for opportunities to practice my Spanish. And then he's like, I would love to invite you to my church. Hands me his card. And I look at it, and I was like, oh, no. I'm like, it's you guys.
Oh, no. That's like, insane. That shit is such a small world, right?
It is. And I was like,
you need to start telling people you're Filipino or something.
Right? I know. And I could have passed as Filipino.
Honestly, yeah.
And
your little Asian babies.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly. But yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, of course I, moved to the middle of nowhere, and the first Hispanic people that I meet are from this cult.
Gosh. How long was that after you had moved there? How quickly was that interaction?
Oh my gosh. So I want to say, because I moved in April, and I want to say this happened in like October or November.
Wow.
So it was like within months of me moving, and I'm like, oh no, of course.
That's so, you're like, they found me.
Yeah, and then and then my husband comes up to me, and after the guy walked away, he's like, hey, is that your mom's church? I'm like, shh, can you just not right now? I'm like, nobody
don't make it known.
Like, nobody needs to know.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. Yeah. But yeah, and yeah, it's just, I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, of course. But yeah, it was, I thought about just like going just to, as like a non-member, just to see what they were up to. But I'm like, I would get too nervous. I'm like, they would figure me out right away.
I want to get into the trial a little bit because it was in
Yes.
what 2019 that it
Yes.
kind of all kicked off.
Yes.
Okay, talk
so
about that
he
a little
was-
bit.
Yeah, so he was arrested June 3rd, 2019. And he, I believe, had about like 32 charges at the time. And he was arrested as soon as he had landed in LA. And, he had charges for like human trafficking and abuse of minors and, all that stuff. And unfortunately, the trial kept getting delayed. And it was really hard just watching all the members just being lied to. First they were like, they were saying that it was a deep fake. So they were saying that, yes, the FBI had all these videos, but they were not him in the videos. And this was also around that time where I don't know if you guys remember, like, people were making all these videos with celebrities, and, like, they were making the celebrities say all these things. Like, they would have kind of like a face swap type thing. And so they're saying that that's what they were doing with his face. And then they had switched it to, they were saying like, oh, it's actually the Catholic Church that is behind this. That they're trying to take down the one true church. But yeah, so but it was just, it was just frustrating because, like, they would always, they started immediately telling the members, anytime there was any court hearing, they would always have service. They would tell members, we have an emergency church service, and we need everyone to come, to church so that we can pray for the apostle. And it was one of their ways so that nobody could get connected and see what was going on. Because of how many members there are in this church, they kept the victims' names anonymous. So they, were referred to as Jane Does. And because of that, the church was told that, oh, there's actually no victim. And it's like, no, there are. They're just being protected because they knew how crazy the church members could get.
And because they're children.
Yeah, a lot of them, yes. A lot of them were minors. There were a couple of them that were adults, but they were children when they were abused. They're adults now.
Right. And
they actually just recently, it was so frustrating because the whole 3 years, they kept trying to find out who were the victims. Somehow somebody got a list of names, and they started being outed on the Reddit page. And
oh no!
And so we get a lot of trolls on Reddit, and I can't remember if I mentioned, but I'm one of the moderators on there. And we got somebody on there saying, "Oh, this person's a liar. Don't believe her." And it's like, first of all, there's a reason why. This is why these victims are protected. Because we have people like that trying to cause harm, and it was just it's just frustrating. Just seeing all that.
I remember talking to you, like, we used to talk every single day back when this was going on. We had the group chat and we would talk all the time. And I remember when all this was going on and how, like, scared and frustrated you were. She would always be, like, rage texting, like, this just happened and this guy's a liar. And I'm, like, sitting there, like, I think we even watched, it was in Spanish, but they live streamed the court, didn't they?
They did.
Or wasn't it like, I feel like they live streamed it. Maybe, was it in San Diego or something like that?
You're talking about the one.
Well, I know he was arrested in LA.
Okay.
Yeah, so
maybe I'm way off.
Because the recent one, or there was some court footage. Oh, I know which one you're talking about. You're talking about the one, it was on the Spanish channel. And they did an episode on the cult, and it was this was like a large Spanish. It's almost like putting it on like NBC or like Fox News. So it's like that equivalent. And so this was on that channel, and like it was just wild just listening to all of this, seeing it like on the news. They had actually talked about like the tunnel. So the main headquarters is in Mexico, and the main church actually has tunnels underneath it, and through those tunnels they would sneak the girls into the other houses. But yeah, so it's just like, you know, and through all this, I still have family in it. They just recently live streamed the last court hearing, and it was the sentencing. And what really sucked about that was that this case never went to trial. I mean, like I said, he started off with 32 charges. They had dropped it down to 26 due to some of the girls were not minors when this happened, and just, you know, dumb stuff like that. And he only pleaded guilty to 3 charges out of the 32 that were originally.
What were the 3 charges that he pled guilty to?
And I know one of them, it was like 1 count of forced oral copulation, and it was like 2 counts of I think it was like sexual abuse with minors, something like that. I'll have to like look up the actual like legal, what the legal term was, but it was 3 counts. And
yeah, that's what I read too. Is just 3 counts of a sex crime. Those were the only ones he would plead guilty to.
Yeah. And
if
so
that doesn't, I mean, that shows what a piece of shit he is anyways, though, and it's crazy that people still believe this fucking guy. Yeah.
And he was only given 16 years and 8 months.
Yep.
Which was just really frustrating, because a lot of us were just hoping that this would go to trial, because then all the evidence would be, you know, shown. And now the church just believes, so the church was told that he did this in order to protect the church, and so that they would give him the least years possible, and because he didn't want his church to watch him suffer through trial. It's like, seriously?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it was just so frustrating, because I was hoping that the family that I still have in this church would actually be able to open their eyes and be able to see that. Because right now I'm viewed as the enemy. They, you know, think that I'm, you know, being led by Satan, or, you know, like just some crazy stuff. And they blame, a lot of them blame my dad for me leaving the church, because my dad, you know, he's currently not doing very well. He unfortunately, he's currently on drugs and stuff, and they're saying, you know, it was because of him that the devil came into our family and led us away from the truth. And
they really are gonna blame anything but the actual problem.
They are.
Yeah, they're not going to blame the person who's lying to them all the time at all.
Exactly. And just like, you know, and I tried to, so this hearing was, it was live streamed. And so I sent them all links, and I'm over there messaging them. And of course, they all blocked me immediately. I didn't even get a response back, except for one person. But her response was, they're like, who are you? And I was like, well, you know, I was like, we used to go to church together. And she's like, no, we didn't. I don't know you. I'm like, well, no, I know you. And I was like, I just wanted to let you know that the leader pleaded guilty to 3 charges. And she's like, that's your opinion. And I'm like, nope, this is a fact.
That's your opinion.
That's not your opinion. This actually happened. It's documented. And then he pled guilty to it. There's no opinion about it. Wow.
And that's how brainwashed they are. She, you know,
yeah,
like,
brainwashing for sure.
Yeah, she's like, I don't know why you're trying to intimidate me. And I'm like, I'm not trying to intimidate you. I was just simply letting you know that your leader pled guilty. And she's like, well, that's your opinion. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We'll leave it at that.
I'm going to start using that to people when they tell me something. I'm just like, well, that's your opinion.
The sky is blue. Well, that's your opinion.
No, he's like, you need to show up for work on time. Well, that's your opinion.
Exactly.
I was on time.
God.
I know, it was just crazy. I'm like, no, like, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, this actually happened. Like, he actually verbally said that he was guilty. Like, I don't know how else to get it through their heads. And, at this point, it's like, I'm just like, whatever, I'm glad my mom is out, my siblings are out. I know the truth. And at this point, like, if they choose to continue following him, like, I did my part to try to help them.
For sure.
It's just the thing that also hurts is that they spend a lot of their time working for the church. And, they think that they're doing good. And it's just all this money just goes to this family. And they don't realize that this family, the Joaquin family, they're so rich. Like, they take advantage of just everyone. And, like, one of my cousins works for free every single weekend. Him and his wife selling food for the church. And plus, there's tithing. They give minimum 10% of their paychecks. A lot of the missionaries, actually, they give even more. When my parents were missionaries, they were told that they have to give most of their money to the church. A lot of the girls who would, become missionaries as well, like, they had, like, the bare minimum. Like, some of them couldn't even buy, like, pads and tampons and stuff like that because all their money was going to the church. And it's just frustrating seeing all these people who do believe that this is the way, and they're just getting taken advantage of.
Yeah. That's insane. I hope one day everybody, opens their eyes and does what you did and has the guts to do it. But I think it's just fear. It's so much fear that they're, like, putting into people.
It is.
Yeah. Was there, like, any pivotal moment that, like, some point in your life, I'm guessing when you were a teenager, when you're like, this doesn't feel right, I don't think I need to be part of this anymore?
So, it was actually, for a long time, I just basically, I just felt, like I mentioned, I felt like I was living a double life. I never really, I didn't even start calling it a cult until, like, years later, so basically they isolate you. They make it seem like when you leave, they're like, you're the only one who's ever left the church in the history of this cult, or, and so for years, I just felt like I was, like, the only one who had ever left. And that was until I found Reddit, and I started, reading up on I started reading all these stories, and that's when I had flashbacks of the grooming. And yeah, so I'd forgotten about a lot of this, and so I started reading a lot of other people's stories. And I remember when I first heard about the girls being sexually abused by the current leader, at first I was like, is it possible? And then that's when I realized, like, oh my gosh, like, one girl told a story about how the leader loved hula dancing, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. And so I just went through this, like, period of, like, anger, because these were, even though I had left, I told myself I was never going to be part of this organization anymore, I still thought a lot about, like some of the leaders. Like, I'm like, I'm like, at least they were, good people. And then I realized, no, they actually weren't. Right. They were actually in on it. They were grooming me. And then I just kind of went down the rabbit hole after that. And I started talking to more people. And we all just had, similar stories. There's been so many cover-ups of these types of, abuses. And then I started comparing it to, like, other cults, and it's always the same thing. Like, there's so many other cults where their leader is basically, he's like, they always say that there's a one true church, and he's basically like God on earth, and, there's all these rules. I remember I came across, like, the Moonies in Korea, which have very similar teachings. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this was an actual cult. And like I said, at the time, I didn't realize it. And so it took years for me to even, like, realize that it was a cult. And like before that, I actually just for on my own, like I actually had bought a Bible, and I was like, I'm just gonna. It was an English Bible, and I was like, I'm just gonna read it, uh, just to see what it says. And so I remember like reading a lot of like what the Bible had said, and I'm like, but wait a second, like this contradicts this teaching, or this contradicts that. And so I'm like, is it possible? Of course, me in my naive mind, I'm like, is it possible that the Spanish Bible is different than the English Bible? So that I went ahead and got myself a Spanish Bible, and I started comparing them, and it was just like no. That's when I started to realize like they just took certain verses and they would manipulate them. But so anyway, so I just like so that's kind of how I started like this unlearning all their teachings.
You were thinking for yourself. Yeah. You're like, I do believe in the Bible. I do believe in God, or at least at that point, I don't know if you still do, but you wanted to think for yourself and compare it, which is great. And you weren't too brainwashed to not think for yourself, you know?
Yeah. And so that's when I was like, wait a second, like, I started to slowly realize, like, no, like, a lot of their teachings are just, like, because they claim that they're, like, that they only use the Bible, that their teachings only come from the Bible. They also used to teach that if you were to ever to leave this church, you're never going to find a church like this one, which they weren't wrong about that.
But probably it's a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're the only church that uses the Bible. All these other churches, they praise man. They don't actually pray to God. And so I have...
Wait.
That's why I started laughing. Like, what? That's...
Exactly. Like, if you look at in their hymn books, like their actual hymns, they have written hymns to this man where they call him an angel of God. They call him a saint. And it's like, no, like, these are actual hymns that they sing in their church services. And I'm like, no, like...
It just... Wow. Oh, my God. It just sounds like they gaslight like a motherfucker.
Yeah. Oh, they do. And it's so funny because, like, it didn't click until after I had left. But I'm like, wait a minute. Like, we were in here singing to this man. We used to, like, actually... pray, we would just say, thank God that you sent us and, this apostle and, like, stuff like that. Like, that's just what we were taught. And, I still remember, so when I got invited to a different church for the first time, I still, had those teachings in the back of my head, and I kept thinking, I was like, oh, I'm like, no, I'm not going to go. Because I had told myself after I left, I'm like, I don't want anything to do with religion or anything like that.
Were you scared to go? Like, where it was in the back, you're like, I'm going to get sucked into another cult or something?
Yeah. So, no, my fear was that God was going to punish me.
Oh, girl.
Because I still kept going back and forth. Like, when you're told as a young kid that this is the one true church, like, it kind of, like, stays in the back of your head, like, could they be right? Are they right? Yeah. Are they wrong? So I just kept going back and forth.
Right.
And so I had a coworker who invited me to church, and I kept saying, oh, maybe we'll see. And one day he was like, I'll see you on Sunday. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll see you on Sunday. And on my way to this church, it was like a 20-minute drive. It was the longest 20 minutes of my life because I was thinking this whole time, I'm like, oh my gosh, God's gonna punish me because I left his church and I'm going to this other church. And I like had an anxiety attack on the way there, but I'm like, I promised my friend I was gonna be there. So I showed up, and another thing that they teach us that the cross is bad, which basic Christianity, like, it's based off of the cross. Jesus died on the cross for your salvation. But the cult, they're like, no, the cross is bad. And so I show up to this church, and what's right on top of the roof is a big cross. And so I'm like, oh no. I'm like, oh no.
It's idol worship. That's why. Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my goodness. Like, and they also teach against music. They say that God does not like music. So when they would sing their hymns, it was just the voices. And so, of course, this church
What?
that I was going to, they played music, and there was a woman preaching at the front, which they were, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, this church, I'm like, I was like freaking out, because I'm like,
these
oh
people
my
are
gosh,
crazy. Like,
I'm like, oh no, I'm like, what's gonna happen? And obviously, I survived. It was fine. But I had those teachings so ingrained in my head. Like, I just, like, several times throughout the service, I almost, like, walked out and left. Because it was terrifying. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is, like, for sure, God's gonna punish me this time.
Oh, wow. Do you still find yourself, like, find yourself thinking in certain ways just because it was so ingrained, and then you have to, like, rethink again, like, wait, let me think about that again?
You know, not as much anymore. You know, I'm finally, like, at this point where, like, I'm just in a much better place now, where I'm not afraid to go out and make a decision by myself. Because that's, you know, one thing is that they controlled every single aspect of my life. It was hard for me to make decisions. Even, like, just going out with friends. You know, I felt like I was doing something bad. And so it finally, I'm at a point where I'm like, you know, I can do whatever I want. You know, I don't feel
That's right.
that guilt anymore. And for a long time, I actually used to depend on my husband, because I would ask him for permission. And then, like, it wasn't until years later where I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. I'm like, I don't need to ask for permission for anyone. But it took years of, like, unlearning. You know, years for me to gain my confidence back. Even just, like, you know, going to the mall used to be so overwhelming. Because I'm like, you know, I would go back and forth of, like, they told me I should dress this way, but I want to dress this way. You know, so just buying clothes and stuff used to be overwhelming. I'd go to the store and find cute outfits, and I would just leave them, because I would just, you know, I just had that in the back of my head. We're like, no, I shouldn't be wearing that. And so just a lot of the stuff used to be so overwhelming to me. And, you know, fortunately, now it's not. Now it's, you know, if I want to go and hang out with friends, I go and hang out with friends without feeling guilty. I don't have those panic attacks like I used to. The nightmares, I used to have nightmares all the time. And, you know, fortunately, those have stopped. Every once in a while, I'll have, like, a nightmare about the cult, but it's not as terrifying as it used to be. Because before, I used to be like, oh my gosh, is this a sign that I need to go back? And now it's just, you know, they're just, I would assume.
It's just all that anxiety.
It is, yeah. And, but yeah, no, it's taken years. I'm 30 now, and I left when I was 18, and it's, you know, it's been a long road.
Well, good. I'm glad that you're, like, especially now, it sounds like you're way confident. I love it.
A lot more, yes. You should have seen, Serena has seen my first interview. Even that was, the first time I ever did that was terrifying.
Yeah.
it was good, though. You did so good.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, it was like, I actually received a lot of attacks from that last interview. And I remember the last conversation I had, one of the last conversations I had with my uncle was, he had called me to try and scare me. He's like, he took it so personally, which all I did, I talked about my experience. And he basically was like, you know, God's going to punish you by taking away what you love most, which is your children. So he was basically saying that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I was like, no, like, I'm like, first of all, I'm like, I never talked about you guys. He's like, well, you are talking about the apostles. You were talking bad. I'm like, no. I'm like, all I did was I told my experience. And he's like, well, you need to stay out of my business. I'm like, well, first of all, you were never mentioned. And this was, you know, so he took it so personally, and he thought, you know, by scaring me that I would stop talking. But I will say that I am so grateful for doing that interview, because through that interview, I actually met an ex-minister from the cult who ended up helping in the case with the leader. I ended up after that. That's when I became a moderator on Reddit, and I got to meet one of the Jane Does from the case. I ended up helping her. We put her in contact with the Attorney General, and she was able to, you know, she had all this evidence and everything. And so through that interview, even though like I got attacked by a lot of people, like good stuff still came out of that. And that's kind of what I'm hoping with this. What will happen with this is that it'll reach more people. More people will open their eyes and be like, oh my gosh, like I'm in a cult, and then, hopefully they can start their journey to healing.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you're giving a voice to people that are in there still, and hopefully one day we'll get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna, I just really have like one more question for you is like, so are there like other groups or programs or resources for people who are just trying to get out of a cult or anything similar to a church like that?
I do know that there are cult resources, but like anything specific to this cult as of right now, there isn't. I do know that there are a couple people trying to work on something. They're trying to get like a nonprofit program started. Unfortunately, as of right now, there isn't anything. But maybe someone wants to follow me on I've got an Instagram account, which I forgot to plug in the beginning, but I do plan on sharing more on there, and hopefully once there's something available, I can post it on there, and maybe others can they'll see it, and they'll get the help that they need.
Yeah,
and we'll definitely share that on all of our pages too.
We'll
definitely
plug you for sure, girl, on that one. I'll have it linked below.
Oh hell yeah!
And on the Twitter, and on the Facebook, and on the Instagram.
Yes.
So
yes, yeah.
Yeah, I would start with the Reddit because it sounds like that's a really good resource. Even if you're kind of just questioning things, I think it all started with you questioning everything.
Yeah.
So once people start questioning,
absolutely. I mean, that's how. That's how I even started talking about any of this, because I, had no intentions in the future to talk about any of this. And then, I got to meet a lot more people, and then we all got to share experiences, and it has been healing to me and to other people. I've actually even have gotten to people in person. I've gotten to meet a lot of the ex-members in person,
Nice.
and it's been really, really healing for a lot of us.
Good.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you again for coming on. I'm so happy to talk to you. Like, we need to talk more.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you for being on, answering our questions, and just all of it. This was awesome. Just to listen to you talk, all of your experiences. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. No, it was great talking to both of you. And of course, it's always great to talk to Serena.
All right. Well, go ahead and follow us on Instagram at Weird Mythic Podcast. We're also on Facebook at Weird Mythic Podcast. And always especially about this, if anybody has been in a cult or some type of situation with a church that seems very, not cool, go ahead and send us some information, at weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com. We can always hook you up with Emma if there's anything else that you need to ask her about. Anything like that, go ahead and send us those messages. And always hang out with Serena on Twitter at Weird Mythic Podcast.
Yay, we like hanging out on Twitter. All right, talk to you guys next week. Bye.